Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 263 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the situation where you might find yourself feeling guilty at work. And you might think, well, why would I feel guilty at work? Well, it's a common one for thoughtful leaders sometimes when it comes to workloads or feeling stressed or feeling like they might be burning out and not feeling like they can acknowledge that, and a bunch of other situations which I'll talk about too. So let's get into this topic right now. Now, do you find yourself feeling guilty at work? It might be because you feel like you're not doing enough or you feel bad about taking some downtime. There's lots of potential reasons that leaders might feel guilty at work, and guilt is not a pleasant emotion. So in this episode, I'm going to take a look at some of these situations that lead to feelings of guilt and a simple process you might try to use to work through it. Now, I've noticed that thoughtful leaders can fall prone to feelings of guilt, and not necessarily because they've done anything to feel really guilty about. I think it's because they are naturally inclined to think about the impact they have on others. Thoughtful leaders also have a tendency to be quite introspective, which means they are often acutely aware of their thoughts and feelings. So what sort of things do leaders feel guilty about? Well, I've noticed a few situations that seem to crop up time and time again, and here are some of them. The first one is taking downtime. Whether it's taking a lunch break, a single day off, or a week-long holiday, downtime can be a source of guilt for many leaders. They may also feel guilty about delegating work. Some leaders struggle to delegate because they feel they are placing a greater burden on their team who may already be working quite hard. Another one is working reasonable hours. Many leaders feel compelled to work longer because they feel guilty leaving on time even when they have been effective throughout the day. And the last is holding people accountable. Some leaders feel guilty when they need to hold their team members accountable, and this may be because it involves providing negative feedback, which may make the team member feel uncomfortable. Now, these are just a few examples that I notice can cause feelings of guilt amongst the thoughtful leaders out there. Now, of course, you might be feeling guilty because you've actually done something very wrong, and this is a good signal for you to rectify any wrong you have caused. But for these other guilt-filled situations, let's look at what might be beneath the guilt, so we can potentially think differently about it. And there's a related article you might find useful about 3 ways to reduce unhelpful thinking. You can check that out too. Now, something I've discovered about myself is that I am occasionally vulnerable to being a compulsive rule follower. Now, following rules is often a good thing, because it helps keep our society and our workplaces in some sort of order. However, following rules is not helpful if those rules do not really exist and come from inside our own heads. Now, some of these rules come from the shoulds or shouldn'ts that we tell ourselves. So you might have heard these ones before. You say to yourself, I shouldn't leave early, or I should be doing more of something, or I should be more successful, or I should be able to handle this. Now, it's worth thinking about where these expectations are coming from and whether they are real or actually invisible. And you might find, like me, that many of the expectations flying around in your head are actually unspoken. That is, nobody has ever said they expect this of you, but you have simply assumed the expectation instead. Now, with that said, I'd encourage you to do a simple exercise. Take a notepad and pen and write down all the unspoken expectations, which could be the shoulds or should nots, that you are following at the moment. It can be quite an enlightening process. And another related article you might find useful is Worrying About Work, Tips for Thoughtful Leaders. That'll be on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/263. Now, where do these unspoken expectations come from? Well, they can come from many places and are often a source of feeling guilty at work. Some might come from your childhood and upbringing, your past experiences of various workplaces, and also just generally society itself. Now, some of the unspoken expectations that I feel are at play in many organizations includes things like leaders or managers should work long hours because they have more responsibility, or maybe leaders should be able to handle high stress because they get paid more than others. Or another one is that people should obey the hierarchy and shouldn't question the direction of senior managers. And another one is managers need to work hard to achieve success. Now, I think that many organizations thrive on these unspoken expectations because it influences people to work longer and harder and to stay silent when maybe they should be speaking up. And this is all without having to say these rules out loud. So I've found that one way to tackle feelings of guilt is to follow a simple process of reframing. And reframing is helpful to see things from a different perspective. And I find that coaching is a useful process that can help us reframe our situation, but we can also look to do this for ourselves too. So I've got a simple process which consists of 4 steps. It starts with spotting the guilt, finding the expectation, then reframing, and then taking action. Now let's start by spotting the guilt. A good place to start is by spotting the guilt when it appears. Now usually I feel guilt starting as a sort of tension, a feeling that I am compelled to be doing something but I don't really want to. Now when we feel compelled to take action that we don't want to take, I find that the emotion pushing us to keep going is often guilt. Now you might find that guilt is accompanied by feelings of shame that you aren't living up to expectations, or perhaps it's resentment that you are being forced to do something you don't really want to do. Now for example, I want to take a break but I'll keep working because I feel guilty if I look like I'm not working hard. Now that is, I feel compelled to keep working, and the potential guilt is what is driving me forward even when I know I shouldn't. The second step is to find the expectation. So next we need to uncover the expectation that is hiding underneath the surface, and this is the potential cause of that guilty feeling. Now to do this, we need to consider the unwritten, unspoken, invisible rules that we may be abiding by in our workplace. So let's go back to the example of taking a break at work. Now we've spotted the guilt already. We feel guilty when we look like we're not working hard. In this example, the unspoken expectation in your head might be that managers are always busy. If managers are always busy, then taking a break is simply not acceptable. But remember, this rule is usually invisible. Nobody says it, and you won't find it in the company policy anywhere. Therefore, it is not a real rule, and therefore probably not a reasonable or even sensible expectation. Now you might be listening to this and going, well, I don't have any guilt about taking a break. I know I need to take breaks, which is great. If you're in that situation, then that's excellent. But I can assure you that there are people that feel guilty because they feel like they're going to be perceived as lazy or unproductive if they're taking a break. And these people might actually even be in your team. So you need to be careful not to assume that everyone is like you. Some people need more support to be able to make sure they can take breaks and do things like that without feeling guilty. So step 3 is reframing the situation. So this is about viewing it from a different perspective. Reframing doesn't actually change anything about the world. It simply changes the way we view it. And one example is failure. Some people see failure as a personal defect. I failed and therefore I am not a good person. Others see failure as an excellent opportunity to learn. I failed. I wonder what I could do better next time. Now the situation is the same, but the perspective is very different. One perspective leads to wallowing and feeling bad, and the other leads to learning. So let's go back to our example of taking breaks. The expectation was that managers should always be busy. Taking a break is not busy and might even be perceived as lazy or uncommitted. So to reframe this, we might instead say to ourselves, taking a break will mean I'll be even more productive and effective afterwards. I'll be an even better manager. Now you see, instead of taking a break meaning you are lazy or uncommitted, it now means something positive. So now we've hopefully discovered a positive reframing for the situation. We've turned a potential negative into a positive. And this may mean that instead of feeling guilty, we can feel content with our choice and take the appropriate action, which is step 4. We'll take a break because taking a break makes us more effective as a leader. Now, I find that this simple process can be used in many situations to better understand feelings of guilt and help us to get past them. But you might ask, what if the expectation is not unspoken or invisible, but actually a real expectation? For example, your boss might actually tell you that you shouldn't take breaks because you seem uncommitted or lazy. Or maybe that you should be contactable at all hours because that's why we pay you the big bucks, for example. Now, in this case, you're dealing with a real expectation instead of one just inside your own head. So the choice is clear. If it's a real expectation, is this acceptable to you, or should you be spending your time and energy somewhere else? Now, feeling guilty is not pleasant, and I find this simple process helpful for trying to work through it. And this is why I find periods of reflection valuable for leaders. Reflection provides time and space for leaders to better understand their own thoughts and feelings and hopefully lead better in the process. So if you find yourself feeling guilty based on some invisible expectation, why not challenge it and see what happens? And I'm interested in your comments here. Do you find yourself feeling guilty at work, and what do you do about it? And what are some of the sources of your guilt? Let me and all the Thoughtful Leaders know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/263. And if you think I can help you in the form of coaching, then please get in touch through the show notes page. There's an application there you can submit, and some leaders will be able to get a complimentary coaching session with me to see what it's like to work with me and hopefully help you with some of your challenges. So please apply if you think I could be a good fit for coaching you. Okay, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully you found this useful. Keep up the thoughtful leadership, and I'll be back next time.